So in this latest video looking at ratio proportion, I'll be showing you how to share an amount using a ratio. So as mentioned in a previous video looking at ratios, so ratios are a way of representing proportion in a similar way as we can with fractions. Where fractions compare an amount from its total, a ratio compares one part to another, or in some case in others. So you need to see a ratio like scales where you're comparing one part to another, rather than, let's say, a fraction where, if you can see in terms of test scores, where the numerator represents the score that you've got out of a total of the denominator value or the bottom value. Now we can share an amount using the ratio using three simple steps. And the simple steps are the ones I'm going to show you now on your screen. Now if you're going to make any notes, I strongly recommend you make a note of these three steps, as they do apply to sharing any amount using a range of ratios that you could get presented in a question. So the first step you want to do is add the numbers in the ratio. Now basically what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to kind of write what each of these parts actually represent. So what we're doing here is you're working out the total amount of parts, and that's because that's what the ratio is representing. Now the second step then we need to do is divide the amount by the answer in step 1. And what you're technically doing here is you're working out the value of each part. And again, the key thing to note here is that with more complicated answers or questions involving money, this particular answer you might get in step 2 might be a decimal, and if that is the case, then always remember never to round at this point. And then the final step is then what we need to do is multiply the answer in step 2 by each of the numbers in the original ratio. So what we're doing here is then basically sharing the amount using the ratio. And then the key thing to note with regards to these steps is that make sure you write your answers in step 3 in the same order as the numbers in the ratio. So for example, if you've got two numbers in the ratio and your first number is bigger than the second, then your answer, the first number, should be bigger than the second number. So in terms of the size of your answer in step 3 must kind of be representative of the ratios that you may have in your original question. The second step is make sure you include any units in your answers. So if you're sharing money, make sure your units of your answer in money. If you're sharing weight, then again, make sure you've got your weight units, etc. And the last thing is make sure you read the question carefully, because as some questions might be worded very, very similar. However, in some questions it might ask you to work out all the parts, or in some other questions it might ask you to work out one case in particular, or maybe working out the difference between the largest amount or the smallest amount. So looking at our first example, now the key thing you want to do when you're reading any ratio question is first of all understand what type of question it is. Now if it's a sharing an amount from a ratio question, which is what the whole video is about, so all the questions will be relevant to this, is you need to basically find out two bits of information. The first bit of information you need is the amount, which is this here, and it's not always going to be necessarily money. And the next thing we need to look at is the ratio. Now sometimes you might have two numbers in the ratio, sometimes you might have three numbers in the ratio, but the good thing is that it doesn't affect the three steps that we then need to do to complete this question. So again, the first thing we need to do is do step 1. Now with step 1 you don't necessarily, all we need to do is add the numbers in the ratio. Now you could easily do this in your head, you don't necessarily have to write this down, but technically what we're doing is we're working out the total number of parts. So here in the ratio we've got 2 to 3 parts, so in total we've got 5 parts. Now the second step is what I then need to do is divide the amount, which in this case is 240, and divide that by the answer in step 1. And by doing that, all I'm going to do is do 240 divided by 5, which gives me an answer of 48. And then the last thing I've then got to do is step 3, and if I write down the numbers in the ratio, so here I've got 2 to 3, and again all I'm going to do is multiply the numbers in the ratio by the answer in step 2. So I'm going to multiply 2 by 48, which gives me £96, and then I'm going to do 3 times 48, which gives me an answer of £144, and there is my answer. Now again, what we want to do is just make sure we've written down the units, which we have. make sure the order in which we've done it is in the correct order of the ratio. So here you can see by how I've set the workout. In step 3 I've wrote my ratio, and then I've just multiplied that by 48, wrote down the answer, then wrote down 3 times 48, wrote down my answer, and I've got the answer there. So in my ratio, the smaller number is first. In my answer, the smaller number is first. Now it's always good practice if you do have a chance to check your answer, and how you do that is by adding these numbers up. So if I do 96 plus 144, it should equal the original amount that I was sharing, which in this case it does. So it gives me an answer of 240. So then there's a good chance that I've done this correctly. So moving on to another example. So here we've got to share 450 kilograms in the ratio of 4 to 2 to 3. So again, I've got my amount, which is 450, and I've got my numbers in the ratio. So again, the first thing I want to do is add the numbers up. So I've got 4 plus 2 plus 3, which is 9. I'm then going to divide the amount, so 450 divided by 9. So 450 divided by 9 equals 50 kgs. So what I've done, and I'll just go through this, so in total I've got 9 parts. So 9 parts equals 450 kgs. So therefore 1 part is going to equal 50 kilograms. And then the third step, all I then need to do is write down the ratio and then multiply both these numbers by 50. And so here I have the answer of 4 times 50, which is 200. I don't know why I've put pounds. So again, we're working with kilograms. And then 2 times 50, which is 100 kilograms. And then 3 times 50, which is 150 kilograms. And again, if I want to check the answer, I just add those numbers up. And again, so to check, 200 plus 100, oh, not 1000, plus 150 equals 450. I don't know why I keep writing thousands. 450. And there you go. Again, you don't have to check your answers for every single question, but again, it's good practice if you do have some time at the end of, let's say, an exam, just to make sure you have done it correctly. So question 3 again. So here we've got our ratio 1 to 3. So here we're dealing with money, and we've got a decimal answer. So here again, step 1, I'm going to add the numbers in the ratio. So I've got 1 plus 3, which is 4. And then step 2, I'm going to do £37.50, or dollars I should say, divided by 4. And do 37.5 divided by 4 gives me an answer of 9.375. Now again, here I've got a decimal answer, which is not surprising really, as the amount was in a decimal. So again, I'm going to keep following the same steps. I've got 1 to 3, so I'm going to times this by 9.375, and then times this answer by 9.375. So here I get the answer of 9.375 to the ratio of 3, and I get 28.125. Now, because it's dealing with money, now obviously we can't leave our answer like this. Obviously I could have my units, which is looking at dollars, but because we can't have 0.5 of a cent in this particular case, so what I need to do is round these numbers up. Now, when it comes to rounding with 0.5, it's a case of which one do we tend to go up for, because obviously in this case we're going to be rounding up for both cases as it ends in a 5. So this would be $9.38, and this would be $28.13. Now the problem about doing this is that when I add these two amounts up, it's not going to add up to $37.50. So here I've got a bit of a dilemma. Now this is what we'd class as a bit of a dubious question. Now generally speaking, it is really more important that the two amounts that we've got have to add up to the shared amount. So here what we'd probably do is, now you probably get away with you could either write $9.37 to $28.13, or you could have $9.38 to $28.13. and 12 cents. So in this particular case, you could get away with writing both answers, but the most important thing is that the two amounts have to add up to the amount that you are sharing. And like I said, these are quite rare questions that come up. I've purposely picked this particular question just to give you an idea of what you would do if this is the case. But generally speaking, if some time has been taken to write a maths question carefully, particularly related to this subject, they would try and avoid these types of situations. And the key thing to remember is that when rounding with money, when working with money, it's worth just writing. So when working with money, always round your answers to 2 decimal places. So in other words, the nearest pence or cent, etc. Now, if this was relating to any other unit, so for example, if this was relating to weight or height, then I could leave my answer as 9.375 and 28.125, but only because this is relating to money would I then have to round my possible answer up. So again, if this was related to any other units apart from money, I could get away with leaving the answer in its exact form, like so. That's a pretty poor way of highlighting it, but basically like so. So let's have a look at another question. So here we've got so Shayna and Naya share £680 in the ratio of 3:2. How much more money does Shayna get? So here we're not actually working out the shared amount. Here we've got to actual, and the question's actually asking is how much more does Shayna get? So the first thing we need to do is work out how much does each of these girls get. So the first thing we need to do here is add the numbers in ratio. So I've got 3 plus 2, which is 5. The second step is then do 680 divided by 5. So 680 divided by 5 gives me 136. And then what I then need to do, now in terms of presentation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down both their names in the order in which it's written in the question. So I've got Shayna and Naya, and I've got the ratio 3:2. So again, I'm going to multiply both these two numbers by 136. So here I've got 3 times 136 is 408. And I've got 2 times 136, which is 272. Now again, I've not finished the question because the question is asking me how much more does Shayna get. So what I need to do is work out the difference. So here it's going to be 408 minus 272. So 408 minus 272 gives me an answer of 136. Now, it is always, and again, this is just highlighting the fact of always making sure you read the questions carefully to make sure that when you have got your final answer, you have actually answered the question, the question that's been asked. So moving on to the next one. So here we've got angles in a triangle are shared in the ratio of 2 to 3 to 4. So, and the question is asking us to calculate each angle. Now there is a clear thing missing in this particular question, and that is the total. I haven't got an amount to share. Now the key in this is the fact that we're talking about angles in a triangle. Now the key thing to note that angles in a triangle, so these 3 angles here, all add up to 180 degrees. So this is my actual amount. So what I'm going to do is add the numbers in the ratio. So here I've got 2 plus 3 plus 4, which is 9. I'm then going to divide 180 divided by 9, which gives me 20. And then I need to then multiply 20 by the numbers in the ratio. So I'm going to times 2 by 20, 3 by 20, and 4 by 20. So here I get 40 degrees. What am I doing there? So here I've got 40 degrees, I've got 60 degrees, and I've got 80 degrees. And I have no idea why I've wrote commas, so let's just get rid of that and write it as a ratio. And there is our final answer. And then finally, here what we've got is a more complex question, and this definitely involves a fair bit of reading. So it says a brother and sister share out their collection of 5,000 stamps in the ratio of 5 to 3. The brother then shares his stamps with his two friends in the ratio of 3 to 1 to 1, keeping the most to himself. How many stamps does each of his friends receive? Now this is a multi-stepped ratio question, and if you were to get this in an exam, then it would be worth a fair few marks to boot. So it's really important that you present your work and set your work out collectively and properly. So the first thing we need to do here is let's write down the two people. So here we've got the brother and we've got the sister, and they're sharing the amount of 5,000 stamps in the ratio of 5 to 3. So what we need to do first is going to do 5,000 divided by 8, and I do 5,000 divided by 8 gives me an answer of 625. So the first thing you need to do is then times both these two numbers by 625, in which I get 5 times 625 gives me 3,125, and 3 times 625 gives me an answer of 1875. So this is how much the brother has got, that's how many stamps the sister has got. Now all I'm focused on is the amount that the brother has got, which is this amount here. So this now becomes my new amount. So what this brother has then done is he shares his stamps. So here now we've got brother and we've got friend 1 and we've got friend 2. And that's in the ratio of 3 to 1 to 1. So now what I've got to do is share 3,125 in the ratio of 5 by adding 3 plus 1 together. So I've got 3,125 divided by 5 gives me an answer of 625 again. So here I'm going to do 3 times 625, 1 times 625, and 1 times 625. So 3 times 625 gives me an answer of 1875, and then I'm going to have 625, 625, and then the question's asking us how many stamps does each friend receive. Well, here each friend receives 625 stamps, and there is our final answer. Now if you're wanting to practice being able to share an amount from a ratio, there will be a link to a worksheet with their answers in the description below.